Welcome, everyone. Thank you for coming to this event. This is our first time homebuyer seminar, Home Buying 101. We're really excited to bring this kind of event to everyone. We've done dozens of webinars over the last year, especially when COVID hit. And this is one of our first more real estate focused ones. We did one about renting in New York, but we thought it was time to bring a home buying seminar to everyone. So I'm very, very thankful for the panelists that we have here. I'll introduce them in one moment. But you all know why you're here. You want to learn more about this crazy process, what it's like to buy a home, and I think no matter where you are in this process, this trio will definitely be able to help you get a sense of next steps and ultimately close the deal on your home. So here's our crew. We have Liz Perez Barletta. She's an attorney at Ligris. Ooh. Liz practice focuses primarily on representing home buyers, sellers, and lenders for the acquisition, sale, and financing of real estate. She was named a Massachusetts Super Lawyer Rising Star in 2015 and 2017. So you got a pro. Kevin McMath is also with us. He is part of the #1 independently owned real estate agency on the North Shore of Boston. That's J. Barrett and Company. He's a certified realtor, and he uses experience in sales, expert negotiation skills, and an unwavering commitment to customer service to help clients find their home on the North Shore of Boston, as well as in the city of Boston. Gary Giorlamo has entered the mortgage industry back in 2012 and has helped thousands of families achieve their dream of home ownership. He's been recognized by Scotsman's Guide as one of the top loan originators in the country for the last 2 years. So again, before I hand it over, just to remind you, please put all your questions in chat and make sure you're muted for the event. We'll definitely get to some more interaction by the end. And with that, Liz, I'll hand it over to you.
All right. How's it going, everyone? We are so excited to be here. And like Joe mentioned, this is sort of like an open forum on questions in the chat. So in the event that you have any questions about what we're talking about, please don't hesitate to reach out through the chat box. But really just to kind of get the ball rolling with, that question. You're interested in buying a home. Like, I'm thinking of it. What do I need to do? Today, we don't have a financial advisor in the panel, but that's something that a lot of my clients think that is sort of not a necessity. Financial advisor, I'm not a millionaire. Why do I need that? But sometimes it's a good place to start to think about sort of your whole financial picture when you're starting this process of potentially wanting to buy a home. So a financial advisor can really help you kind of fit the home buying piece into the whole puzzle of your financial life moving forward. They can talk to you about down payment options, as can Gary, preparing for the different types of changes your home ownership can bring. But more than anything, it's the most important part of the beginning of a home buying process is assembling your team. And that's what we're here today to kind of talk through basically the whole process of buying the home and who the key players are. So the first step really is kind of in Gary's court. So we really want to make sure that you are financially able to purchase this home. So I'll let Gary go through this slide talking about the pre-approval process.
Thanks, Liz. So just a little bit about the initial process when you're looking to purchase a home. I'm the lender, so I'm going to say the pre-approval is the most important part. I'm sure, every part of this is very important, and it's good to have, the right people on your team. But usually you're coming to me before you're coming to a realtor, because most realtors want to know, what you're able to, your purchasing power. They don't want to take you around if you're not qualified for the property. So the first thing you're going to do, you're going to come to me and we're going to talk about a pre-approval. Pre-qualification isn't so much of a thing anymore. It was when I first started. However, you're going to want a pre-approval. And what a pre-approval means is I'm collecting the necessary documentation up front. And I think we're going to touch upon the documentation in some later slides. So I won't go into that too in depth yet. But essentially, I'm going to check your credit. I'm going to get some income documentation. I'm going to collect assets. And we're going to discuss, the best down payment for you, the best loan program. And that's all going to be decided based on the type of property you want, obviously the available funds you have. So once we have all of that nailed down, what I do is I plug it into my system and I make sure we have an automated underwriting approval. Once we have the automated underwriting approval, the system is approving the assets and the income that we use. So once you do find a property, we're really just underwriting and looking for title work and an appraisal. So you're kind of covering your bases up front by getting all the documentation together, which is why they call it, the pre-approval. As far as time and costs, the closing costs are always a big question. And there's a lot that goes into the closing costs. I'll let Liz, talk about the attorney fees and title insurance. But from a lender's perspective, what you're going to want to look at is the origination fee. Most of the time, it's going to be similar, whether you go to, a local lender, whether you go to a bank, a credit union. The origination costs are going to be somewhere around the $1,500 range, in that ballpark. And what that does is it pays our underwriters and our processors. So it's just a flat fee that you pay. That's what you pay for the closing costs to work with us as a lender. And obviously, you're able to shop lenders, find who has the best costs and the best interest rates. So that's something you'd want to do at the time of pre-approval as well. You'd want to be conscientious of the rates you're being offered and what their closing costs look like. So as I kind of mentioned in my early spiel, is the factors that go into the pre-approval. The property type is going to be pretty important because the down payments are going to be predicated on the type of property you're buying. So there are programs with down payment assistance that will allow 0% down on single families and condos. Most of the time we look for at least a minimum of 3% down. That fits our conventional products. And the multifamilies are going to require as little as 3.5% down for what's called an FHA loan, or as little as 15% down for a conventional product. So all of those down payments, rates, all of those are predicated on the property type, and it's also going to depend on your income and credit score. So there's a lot of things that go into the pre-approval up front. So it's very important that you have all this nailed down. And that way, when you go to Kevin and you want to look for a property and you put an offer in and you're working with Liz, they don't have to worry about the financial aspect of it because you want to make sure that you really go through the full pre-approval process up front.
Awesome. And just to touch on that, like I'm sure a lot of people have heard how crazy the market is these days. And you really want to be in a position to be talking to Gary at the onset. So that way, you know exactly what you can afford. And that you aren't going to have a disappointment once you are getting an offer accepted, finding out that because you went to, someone who's not checking all those documents in advance, that you actually cannot afford what you thought you could. And that's super disappointing. So having someone like Gary actually look at documents for pre-approval is absolutely important. Kevin, choosing a realtor.
Thanks, Liz and Gary. Hi guys, my name is Kevin McMath. I work up on the North Shore, but I also service Boston. Choosing a realtor. So I think some of the most important things about being a realtor is the listening skills. I need to be able to find the type of home, condo, investment property that you are looking for. Usually after you're pre-approved, we have I would meet you for a cup of coffee pre-COVID times, but right now we usually have a little phone call and we determine your price point, how many bedrooms you're looking for, what type of property it is, and what towns. So that's where I educate you on you can get more bang for your buck in certain areas versus other areas. Location's everything when it comes to real estate. From there, after we determine what you are looking for, I sign you up on MLS where you'll get automated emails every morning with the properties that are on your list. From there, a lot of people think real estate can be a very hard process. We make it very easy by using Gary and Liz as my team. I would say 90% of my deals and homes that I sell are with Liz and Gary. Just because I know that I can fully trust them. I can, at 9 o'clock on a Sunday night, I can get a hold of both of them if they're not sleeping. So then we start going out to look for houses. Sometimes I have clients that they fall in love with the second house they see and we start tossing in offers. I always recommend people to see at least 5 or 6 before so they can get a feel, because once you're in there, it's a big financial obligation that you're going after. So you got to make sure you love the house. There's clients I've shown 30 houses to, so don't be scared of that either. It varies on the person. The ways to get more value I was discussing earlier is definitely location. Location's everything in real estate. If you want to buy a home, say you're in Boston and you want to buy a condo in Charlestown for $700, you can probably get the same condo in East Boston for $550, $600. So that's where you kind of can find more value in homes. You can probably even get parking too. So it really just comes down to the location and things of that nature. Talking about being able to take phone calls, I know everyone who's buying or selling a home, they usually always have a lot of questions. You need to have lenders, realtors, and attorneys that are able to take those calls. And like I said earlier, Liz and Gary, I know I had them on speed dial, and if they don't answer my call, they call me right back and they get back to me right away. And then peace of mind, you want to make sure that you're working with a trusted professional who's been doing it for a while. I've been involved in real estate for years. Over the past couple of years, I've sold over 50 houses, and I work alongside Gary and Liz for a majority of all of them, and they give some of the best service that's out there. That's why I chose them as my team.
Love it. Awesome. So I feel like this is a big question, Kevin, that people are always asking. How much to offer once you find that place?
Yeah. So once we find that place, it's not always just the offer price. Terms is a big thing as well. And we can get into that on this slide. But usually when you find it, say you find a single family and say you're in Melrose and it's on for $699, I'll try and find 4 to 5 comparable comps for that to show square footage, how many bedrooms, how many bathrooms, and what the actual sale price was, and the days that it took to get that offer. From there, that's where we determine what we should offer on the actual house. But right now, I think terms is a real big thing. And I think that's Liz and Gary have been seeing that in a lot of offers as well. There's not a lot of inventory. So I think we're doing like 3 deals right now where we're either doing rent backs or extended closes because the sellers need to go find a place to live as well. So I know one of the houses that we have under agreement right now, the 3 of us, part of the reason I got it under agreement was we gave them the seller a rent back for 60 days and we're not charging them at all. So say you get a house under agreement in April, your first mortgage payment is until June 1st. So to make that offer a little bit stronger, we're closing next week, but we're allowing the seller to live there till May 31st so they can find their home or their rental, but they're not paying that mortgage. So it made our offer a little bit stronger. There's things like that to spice up the offer.
I think that's a huge point, Kevin, because for those, I feel like a lot of people just have that belief that, if you're up against cash or it has to be like the highest offer to win. But I've seen a lot of offers accepted because of terms. So having a realtor that will work through being like creative with the type of offer you're putting together and like finding out from the selling side, what the sellers want is huge. And that's why Kevin's so successful in getting those offers accepted a lot of the time.
Yeah. I mean, that made our offer $5,000 more by not having to pay $5,000 more by allowing them to live there. We also, it allowed us to not, with terms right now, as you guys are seeing, people are waiving a lot of the contingencies. We didn't have to waive any contingencies on that by thinking outside the box with something as simple as that. But definitely one of the most important things though, before we put in the offer going in, definitely have to know what the maximum dollar you want to spend. So if your max is $700 and you want to go see a house for $699, just the way the market is right now, I in a lot of towns, actually the national average, I think said something last month that like 60% of the houses are going over asking right now. I'll have to confirm that number this month, but it is a very difficult market. So we definitely have to know what your maximum top dollar is. And so then we're prepared for a counter offer as well. Typically right now, we're going up against a lot of offers. They usually come back to the top 2 or 3 for the counter offer. Right now we've been going up, depending on the property, 10, 15, 20 offers. So you just have to know, what I always advise my clients is put your best foot forward on the first offer, because we might not get the second.
Right. Cool. So home inspections, you want to touch on that as well, Kev?
Yeah, absolutely. So home inspections, it's a big deal, because when I go see houses with you, I'm not a licensed home inspector. I can just give you my best judgment by the homes that I see, what I think is serious, what I don't think is serious. But at the end of the day, I'm not licensed at it, so I can't give my full expertise on that. So home inspections typically take place 7 to 10 days after the accepted offer. I've been pushing that up a little to make the offer a little bit stronger. I usually say that we'll get it done in 3 to 4 days to get the home inspection done, because sometimes when people see it out a little bit longer, the sellers, if it's like 7 or 10 days, they're like, and then the buyer backs out after the home inspection. In the seller's eyes, they think they just wasted 7 to 10 days. So that's why I've been putting like 3 to 4. I have a list of home inspectors that I've been using for years across Boston and the North Shore that I can recommend. They typically take about, depending on the size of the house, anywhere from 90 minutes to 3 hours. I typically see them anywhere from about 400 to I think the most expensive one I've had was $650. The main thing I always say about home inspections, whether it's a brand new house or house built in the 1800s, there's going to be something that pops up. I've sold a house that was a year old last year, and that buyer had a home inspection and the AC condenser was only a year and it's already broke on them. So that's just a good example to show that even those brand new houses have issues. There was a brand new construction house I sold in Winthrop a few years ago. When we did the home inspection, the home inspector noticed mold in the basement, and it was a brand new house ground up. So that's just something to know, is that no matter what home inspection you're doing, no matter how old the house is, something's going to pop up. It's their job to show you and recommend things to fix in the house. Sometimes the issues are so bad where if it's structural or mechanical, that's not visual to the eye when we're initially going in, that there'll be times I go back to the seller's agent and try to renegotiate the price of the house or ask the seller to fix it. It's a case-by-case situation. At the end of the day, we don't get to make the decision if they fix it or not, and the seller's not obligated to fix it, but it's another chance to, if it's the right thing to do, and we're not just trying to nickel and dime the sellers. It's not supposed to be a time for renegotiation, but if it's serious enough, absolutely, we can ask them to fix it or knock some money off the either closing costs or purchase price. One way I've been making the offers a little bit stronger, because some people are waiving home inspections. I put into the offer that we won't negotiate the price following the inspection, so it's more for informational purposes only. You do still have the right to back out after the home inspection. You're not tied to the house, so if something did pop up, you do have the right to back out if you weren't feel comfortable going forward. And then one thing I always recommend at home inspections, it's like an extra, I think it's like an extra $50 to $75. I always recommend having a radon test. You leave it typically in the basement for 48 to 96 hours, and you have to, I'll go back to the house to pick it up. It's just a type of way to test for radon gas if there's any presence in your house. I've probably had 4 houses that had radon that have come back in the past probably 2 years, where it was above the limit that's considered dangerous. And typically every time the seller will, because that's not something you can see at a home inspection, typically the seller will accommodate that and get it mitigated to get the radon out of the house, because they don't want to be living in there with it either.
Yeah, all great points. And just one thing to mention too, that so Kevin mentioned that some people are in this market waiving home inspection. So this is part of the offer that you would compile with Kevin when you're submitting it and you find a home that you want to put an offer on. This would be one of the contingencies that you could or could not include. So it's not something that's a given, like you're always guaranteed a home inspection. It's something that you have to be, like the sellers have to accept in the offer you submit.
It's definitely a way to get the offer stronger. like, even if you have someone if one of your family members is in the business and you feel comfortable enough to have them come see the house before we put the offer in at the open house or at a showing, because it does, a lot of people are doing it, does make the offer stronger, but I'm not legally able to tell you to waive it. So that's why I can't actually tell you to do it. But what I actually been doing, because to be a little bit more strategic with it, I've been trying to set up appointments that are like on showing time to try and block away 60 minutes. So if they do have a family member who's a contractor in the business, we kind of scope out the home. We do a little pre-inspection before we submit an offer.
It's a great strategy too. So, I mean, again, it's whatever you can do to get some edge here.
Some sellers are putting home inspection. They had the home inspection before they put it on the market too, and they put it on MLS. So it's when they put it on the market, they attach the home inspection report.
That's awesome.
That's something that I've been seeing lately.
That, which I wish every seller did that.
I know.
Eliminate a lot of time wasted, but all right. So the next step. So let's say you got pre-approved with Gary, you went shopping with Kevin, you found a property, you got your offer accepted, you had your home inspection, and everything's good. The next step is where the attorney actually gets involved, and that's what's called the purchase and sale agreement. So it's basically like the offer on steroids. So the offer is about 2 pages long. It's a fill in the blank form with all the key, the price, the address, if you want that pool table in the basement, all that stuff is part of your offer. That same stuff makes its way into the purchase and sale agreement, but for the most part, the purchase and sale, or we call it the P&S, is prepared generally by the seller's attorney. And it's most of the time not a standard form. It's a Word document where literally every word can be a negotiated point. So that's why it's super important to have an attorney representing you as a buyer to make sure that whatever the seller's drafted makes its way into an agreement that's actually more fair for both sides. The cost associated with an attorney varies. So oftentimes you'll see in certain situations, attorneys waiving their fee if they also work with the bank that you're choosing. But I would say for the most part, I also see attorney fees for you as a buyer, the cost associated with that role ranging from, like, again, free to $2,500. Like, I definitely see the range. There are still attorneys out there that are charging hourly, believe it or not. The majority of attorneys in the industry, they charge flat fees. So that way, from the beginning of the transaction, you know exactly what you're in for. But I have seen attorneys out there charging hourly, and those people usually are maybe family lawyers who, you know, maybe your father's lawyer who's a bit older and may not focus primarily in real estate. So his practice is one where he charges hourly, which is totally fine. That's totally cool with like legally, they can charge whatever they want. But in this area of the law, the majority of attorneys are charging you a flat fee. So if you are hearing from an attorney who's charging you on an hourly basis, the likelihood is they may be very smart and capable lawyers, but they may not be lawyers who focus primarily on real estate. And the risk there is that you may be trying to get a hold of an attorney who is in court all day. So just, I can kind of go on a rant for a long time on that part, as Kevin knows, because whenever there's somebody who's not focused in real estate on the other side of a deal, it just makes it much more difficult. But we'll move on to the next point. So the timeframe for the P&S is basically already established in the offer. So when you submit your offer with Kevin, it's going to have all the dates that work for you. It's going to have your closing day. It's going to have the day that the purchase and sale agreement needs to be done. So basically, like I said, we focus on whatever's in the offer and incorporate that into the purchase and sale agreement. There is the potential for attorneys in a buying side of a deal. So the bank attorney as well as the buyer's attorney. So the bank attorney is the person who, for example, Gary's office needs to hire to research the title to the property to make sure what you're buying is clear, marketable title. Basically, all that means is we're doing the research in the history books at the Registry of Deeds for your particular property, and we're specifically looking if the seller's been sued, if the seller owes mortgages, if back taxes, all those different things we're researching and making sure that that all gets resolved before the keys are yours. The buyer attorney is different because that role of the research of the title and closing for the loan is what we do for the bank. For the buyer, we negotiate the purchase and sale agreement and essentially are available to the buyers throughout the process with any and all questions. So although the roles are complementary, and the majority of the time we actually act in a dual capacity where we're helping the bank and you as a buyer, that's not always the case. So you just want to make sure that when you're talking to an attorney, they're clear to you whether they are working with you and the bank, or just you, or just the bank. Because you want to make sure that someone is representing you and negotiating that contract on your behalf. Just kind of reiterating the fact that a lot of the terms of the offer, like who the parties are, the time, the inspection items, dates, all of that comes from the offer. And so once the purchase and sale agreement has been signed, been negotiated, reviewed, and you have blessed it, then the next part is really the most important besides finding the house, and that's the mortgage process. Gary, if you want to take it over.
I'll jump back in here. So I did mention, upfront what we usually require for pre-approval. As you can see here, before you would even sign the mortgage application, I would have collected all of the required documents at the time of pre-approval. And some of those required documents, they're always going to be, if you're a wage earner and you receive a W-2, I'm always going to ask you for 2 years of your last. So right now I would ask you for your 2019, your 2020 W-2s. We always want to see the 2 prior years, and we always want to see updated pay stubs. We want to make sure that we're really up to date. If your terms have changed, if you're an hourly employee, if you've gotten raises, if your salary, we want to know what your salary is. So we'll always collect W-2s and pay stubs. In some occasions, we will require tax returns, but that's not always the case. If you already own other property and you have rental income that you claim, that would be one reason we needed your tax returns. If you're self-employed and you have a Schedule C and you claim your income there, that would be another reason why we request tax returns. But they're not always requested. It depends on your employment, your type of employment, and if you own other rental properties. Aside from that, we'll always need bank statements. We like to collect 2 months of all bank statements, but they're also throughout the mortgage process. You have the ability to get a gift, so you can get gifts from family members and close friends. So if that were the case, we would require a gift letter from whoever you're receiving the funds from, and we would require bank statements from them. So depending on where the funds are coming from would be how we would decide what we need from you guys in terms of assets. So retirement accounts, mutual funds, anything like that, we wouldn't need that up front unless the assets were coming from there. Same thing with a gift. So aside from the W-2s, pay stubs, potentially tax returns, and bank statements, I would pull your credit up front at the time of pre-approval. But other than that, I should be able to really get you a full pre-approval and not really have to bother you guys throughout the process. And at that point, you guys will have your loan application submitted, assuming you have an accepted offer, and you'll receive your loan disclosures. The loan disclosures will touch upon what Liz had already talked about in terms of the attorney fees, what I had talked about in terms of the origination charges. It will really give you guys a breakdown on what you're going to be looking at, so you know what you're going to be spending throughout the process, not only upfront when you're putting your initial deposits down, but at the time when you get to the closing table, which could be anywhere from 30 to 45 days from when you get your offer accepted. And in some occasions, like Kevin had mentioned, if the sellers aren't going to do a rent back, they may want an extended closing, so they give themselves some extra time to find a property. During the mortgage process, and this has become not so much an issue, but it's very important that you understand what happens with the appraisals. We will order an appraisal at the beginning of the process, and you're going to need an appraisal on every purchase or refinance transaction. So what happens is we send a third-party appraiser out, and what he does is he reviews the subject property, the property you guys are buying, and they'll take into consideration the square footage, the bedrooms, the lot size, the condition of the property, how new it is. So there's a lot of things that go into the report, and what they'll do is, like Kevin had mentioned when he talked, they'll use comparable sales. They try to go within the last 6 months, and they try to keep it in the area you're purchasing. So if you're purchasing a house or a condo in Charlestown, these appraisers are going to look at recent sales in that Charlestown market that are similar to your property. So they're going to want to see similar square footage, bedroom, bathroom count, stuff like that. So what they do is they put together a whole report, and they'll come up with their fair market value of the property, and they'll come back to the lenders with that report. And what we want to see is that they're validating the sale price, because we're lending the money. We want to make sure that we're lending the money on a property that has sufficient value. Since the market's a little crazy right now and stuff's going over asking, like Kevin had mentioned, I think he said 60% of the property is selling for over asking. The appraisal is very important. So if the appraisals come in low, there's different things you can do. You have grounds to back out if you want to get out of the transaction. You have grounds to renegotiate, or you can come to me and we can talk about restructuring your financing and still trying to make the transaction work. So the appraisal is one of the most important things throughout the process, because that could be something that, changes the way the financing is done. Or it could be a situation where if you guys don't want to overpay for something, you say, we're going to back out and move on to another property. So that is very important. And it is done by a third party company, because we really want to be totally, we want them to have no, interest in our, and if the transaction moves forward, we don't want them to be swayed that they need to, bring in the value at the purchase price. So it's totally independent. They come up with their value, and when they get the report back to us, assuming it's sufficient value, it allows us to move on. We send the title request out to Liz, assuming everything checks out with the title and the appraisal. That's when we would get the loan back to underwriting to get everything cleared to close and get you guys to the closing table. And Kevin hands you the keys to the new house.
Awesome. So once your loan is approved, we actually, as the closing agent, the attorney for the bank, we receive the closing package directly from Gary's closing department, who will prepare all the documents. We kind of assemble them, and will finalize the last minute figures with the closer. There is a new law. It's not new anymore, but several years ago, there was a law that passed where it requires that the lender submit to you as a buyer your estimated final closing figure business days prior to closing. So the majority of that, though, there are still the ability for some tweaks between you and the seller for like taxes and insurance or condo fee, depending on what type of property you're buying. So that sort of estimated final number you get from the lender won't be the final. So your lawyer, your attorney will actually be the one who sends you that final figure that you'll need to bring to closing. And once all of that happens, basically the step before that would be walking through. So I don't know, Kev, if you want to talk about a little bit about the walkthrough, sort of how that happens, how it gets scheduled, and what the buyers can expect.
Yeah, so final walkthrough. I usually do that either the night before or the morning of closing. What it is we just go through the house, make sure the appliances are still there, the water's still running, the lights are on. If there was anything we agreed upon that was being left behind, just making sure that is still there, as well as just making sure the house is still standing. Usually takes about 15, 20 minutes. A lot of the times, if we didn't prior take measurements in the house during the accepted offer phase, the buyers will start taking measurements for furniture, things of that nature. It's pretty simple. I've only been to one final walkthrough in all the years where there was something that wasn't left behind, where I had to make a phone call and get it situated with the seller's agent before closing.
Yeah. So one thing just to mention too, so in the event that there is a problem, I always like to come to explain to clients that there's always a solution in real estate. There's always a way to resolve anything. So generally, if we ever do have a client who has a walkthrough issue, we will try and negotiate a few different things. If it's something that's clear that was the seller's responsibility, some buyers are concerned, well, I don't want to wait to close until that's fixed because I took the day off today. I can't take another day off. Like, what can we do? My rate's expiring with the bank. So oftentimes we do figure out creative ways of still closing on time. Maybe it means asking the seller to hold back some of the money from the seller that we would be giving to them at closing, holding some money back to ensure that they fix that issue that came up. Or maybe it's a matter of giving the buyer a credit for those issues so the buyer can take care of it after they close. So there's usually always a solution, even if something comes up at the walkthrough. But that's exactly the reason why we do the walkthrough, because the moment the deed transfers hands and is recorded, so the deed is the actual legal document that shows that you are the owner of the property. Once that gets registered with the county, that home is yours. So if you didn't do a walkthrough, and had you done the walkthrough, you would have seen that hole that the movers made from the sellers moving out. You don't have an argument to say, seller, fix this now. So that's why it's still super important. Even, even if seller says everything looks good and is all set, it's so important to still do a walkthrough. So I kind of touched on how much do you owe. That's the number that we would have sent to you as the attorney. And that amount generally will be in the form of either a certified check or a wire transfer. So I always throw that out there, especially with my first time home buyers. A lot of people have online banks that have no physical presence in Massachusetts. Or even some ones that do. I have Capital One, for example. When I bought my house, I had to have a check overnighted because even though they have those awesome Capital One cafes, you can get a cup of coffee, you can't get a certified check there. So, for a lot of buyers who have banks like that, you always want to just kind of be prepared in advance of closing to make sure you know how to get either a certified check or a wire transfer. The other thing that I always like to say, like a PSA when there are buyers out there, is that wire fraud in our industry is super real. So we are in an industry that moves very fast. There's offers accepted. We find out our final figures for the closing the day before closing. We need to get that wire sent out. So there's so much emotion and so many moving pieces that it's like the perfect bread and butter for hackers to try and commit fraud. So I always just let consumers out there know that wire fraud does exist in our industry. It's really scary. So one of the things that I always just recommend is making sure you have your attorney's personal contact information. So in the event that you're ever asked to wire funds to an account, you're calling your attorney, that you had their contact information before that email was sent to verify that whatever email you got is actually valid. Because they're so good at kind of masking and making emails look like they're legitimately from us or from Kevin or from Gary. So one of the things that I just like to throw out there for people. Bring to closing. So essentially all you need to bring to closing is that certified check or confirmation of your wire transfer and a form of identification like a driver's license or a passport. About who goes to closing, that is changed in COVID time. So before, it was like a party at a closing. It was, me as the closing attorney. Sometimes Kevin could be there, sometimes Gary, sometimes the seller's attorney, seller's agent. So it would just be a room full of people. Now with COVID, we're trying to limit, who's in the closing room. So it's usually just myself and the client who's buying the property. So keeping that in mind, that it's not as, not as such a big, crazy, fun room, but you still get everything you need, all your information at the closing table. And the only other thing I would mention is about the keys. So a lot of buyers say, well, I just signed my life away. I gave you this huge check of money. Where are the keys? So legally in Massachusetts, you're not the owner of that property, even if you signed it and even if you gave the certified check, until the deed is recorded. And that recording happens here most of the time, especially now, digitally through a electronic filing system with the registry of deeds in the county that you're buying. The problem with that is there are tons of closings happening all the time. And so sometimes you get into a situation where you are closing at 1 o'clock on a Friday and the documents don't make it to record on time. So you may not get your keys because that deed hasn't been recorded yet. So I always just throw this out there as well for buyers. Try to not close on a Friday. Try to close on a Thursday, so you have an extra business day to get things on record where you have, the dates you're moving in or whatever, and try to schedule yourself to take that day off so you can close early in the morning if it's at all possible. Kev or Gary, do you want to say anything about those things?
I avoid Friday closings now. Besides next Friday, we have a closing next Friday, but after that, that's part of my life.
That's the last one.
Yeah, I can attest to that as well. I mean, I think I actually had to deal with the both of you, and we closed maybe at 10 a.m. and I don't know if it got on record by the end of the night. So yeah, Fridays are crazy, and you don't want to leave a bad taste in everyone's mouth for the transaction, because like Liz said, you close, you think you're going to get your keys, you're going to move in all weekend, but it doesn't always work out that way, and it's no fault of Liz's, Kevin's, or myself. It's just sometimes it just doesn't make it on record in time. And closing on a day other than Friday will avoid a potential fire drill at the end of the week. So I definitely agree with that.
Yeah. Or if it's the 30th or 31st or the 15th, avoid all those days.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, and this is just reiterating, like, the final walkthrough, making sure it's in acceptable condition. You go to wire your funds or get a certified check. You sign all your documents. So if anyone has friends or family who have purchased, they may have told you like horror stories of the amount of documents you're going to have to sign. We were hoping that with COVID, things would go more digital. In some situations they have, but the majority of the time we still have to physically be at a closing table, signing 100+ pages of documents. What we do as attorneys in my office and my team, we always try to make sure that you understand what it is you're signing, so you don't walk away from the table like completely overwhelmed, feeling like you just it was like a train wreck and you don't know what you paid for, what you signed. We really want to make sure you are very comfortable because you know what it is you signed and everything's super clear. And that, for the most part, I think we're good with some time for questions, Joe, unless Kev or Gary have something else to mention.
I think we pretty much touched on what we could, but I'm sure we missed some stuff. So yeah, whatever questions anyone has, I'm here to hopefully help.
Yeah. First of all, thank you so much to the three of you for going through this presentation and outlining the whole process. I know, as someone who's personally going through the process, I found it very, very helpful. A lot of questions in the chat were about the pre-approval process.
Yeah.
Specifically, as the Berklee Boston Conservatory community, a lot of freelance musicians, a lot of people whose industries have been affected by COVID,
right?
And very fluctuating levels of income based on gigs and so on and so forth. So I guess in that kind of situation, what are kind of your steps there?
So as I kind of mentioned, if you're self-employed, or you're not traditionally paid, is when we would ask for a little bit of extra documentation. Tax returns, again, if you're filing or claiming your income on a Schedule C, we would definitely need 2 years tax returns. There are some instances where we may be able to get by and get a loan approved without 2 full years of tax returns, but it would need to be a situation where that person had maybe been in that industry prior to that, and could show an employment history, and then maybe went self-employed, but is staying in the industry that they have, prior employment history in. Other than that, self-employed would normally require 2 years filing, so we can see that income, analyze it, and calculate how we're going to use that income. As people know, as self-employed individuals, you may have a gross number of income that you had made, but there's a lot of write-offs. So what we need to do is we need to analyze those write-offs, see what the net profit is, and qualify based on that. Of course, COVID has thrown a wrench into things. Unfortunately, a lot of businesses were negatively impacted. Some businesses are still closed. I wish I could say there was some sort of relief for that, but they've actually, Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac, they make the rules for the mortgages for the most part, and they've actually tightened up on a lot of the self-employment stuff. So in addition to needing those tax returns, we need year-to-date profit and losses. And we also need 3 months bank statements to basically validate that the business is still receiving income. So it's been a lot more difficult for self-employed borrowers. We're still doing them, but it's a little tougher just because of everything that's gone on with COVID and the increased restrictions to get self-employed borrowers qualified. But I always say, come to me. Pre-approvals are free. I'm happy to help and try to walk people through and let them know if there's something that they can do differently. Try to point them in the right direction and set them up. If they're not ready to buy right now, set them up for the future.
Can I touch on that for just 1 second? Because I think it's super important for people out there who are just even interested to call Gary and talk to him about what your options are. Because I've seen a lot of clients recently who expected, oh, maybe this is like a 5-year plan, a 2-year plan. And all of a sudden, when Gary pulls their credit and runs the numbers, they can do it now. So it's one of those things where sometimes it surprises you. And even just credit score in general will surprise you. So just if you get anything out of this presentation today, this is something that you're interested in, I would highly recommend talking to Gary to see what plan he can put you on. And that way you could just have some more direction and sometimes surprise yourself.
Yeah, and just to kind of piggyback off that as well, if you've talked to a lender in the past and you've gotten maybe some, you've gotten some negative feedback from them, or they told you had to wait, still call me. I've had situations where I had a couple who had been told they couldn't get pre-approved for any more than $300,000, and they were paying high rent in an area they didn't want to be in. They had 2 kids, and we were able to get them pre-approved for almost $600,000. So there are guidelines that we all have to follow. However, there's different ways to make sure, maybe different income we can add back or different programs that we can look at. So just because one person told you no, I wouldn't take no for an answer. I'd always call, you can always call me, and I'm happy to help and either validate that or hopefully, get you approved for what you guys are hoping for.
Hey, Gary, I saw one question in the chat too about pre-approvals. One person asked, he thought it cost $1,500 to get a pre-approval.
Okay.
But
yeah, that's a good.
Pre-approvals are totally free. The origination fee only comes when you get an offer accepted and we go through the process.
Yeah, that's a good point. You can, I don't want to say bother me. You can come to me and talk to me for a year, 2 years, have me pre-approve you a dozen times. That does not cost you anything. You do not get charged anything to work with a lender until you get to that closing table. That's when the origination fee comes in. I don't get paid for my time like that. So as much time as you need or as little time as you need, it's going to be the same hefty fee of $0. So, you can always come to me, and if you're not ready to buy right now and you just want to know what you're pre-approved for, that's always an option. I'm happy to get that done. And like Liz said, you may surprise yourself and be more ready than you think you are, because there are a lot of good programs out there with not so much money down, and the credit restrictions go pretty low. So you may be in a scenario where you find yourself able to afford something that you didn't think you could.
One other question just came in about pre-approvals as well, since you're in the hot seat.
Yeah.
Do multiple pre-approvals affect your credit score?
So when we do the initial pre-approval, we do have to pull credit. I can't send a pre-approval without it. So what happens is we pull credit. It's good for 120 days. You can get pre-approved as many times in that time period as you'd like without me having to pull credit again. If you are waiting and having hard inquiries on your credit, it will negatively impact your score. It may drop your score by a point. It may drop your score by 5 points. There's no exact hit for that, but you do want to avoid hard inquiries, continuously pulling your credit if you can do so. But again, if we pulled it once, it is good for 120 days. So, if you want to get pre-approved that first day and come back to me in 3 months, I don't have to pull credit again. It won't hurt your credit. If you want to get pre-approved for a condo, single family, and multifamily, I don't have to pull your credit 3 separate times. That all comes in that initial credit pull. So you will not impact your credit score if we're just working in that 4-month period. If you continuously pull your credit, then it may negatively impact it a bit.
Another question, and this is kind of between a few questions I saw. I know we're all Boston based, but there are people from across the country in the call. I guess I'm wondering, how translatable is a lot of the information from today? I know there's some specific Massachusetts laws that might be different in other places. And people were also looking for recommendations for these kind of connections in their specific areas. I saw LA, San Francisco. I know someone's here from Ohio. So I don't know if there's resources you could recommend for that kind of information for other states.
Yeah, I mean, I can touch on that first. There are some different regulations state to state. I personally am licensed in New England, Florida, and Alabama, so I personally can handle anything there. As a company, we're licensed in every state. We have what's called like our internal referral highway, so I can help everyone with the pre-approvals up front. And if they decide to buy outside of my state, I can send them through into someone who we trust within the company. And I would still be involved, as basically like an assistant on the file. For the down payment stuff, in different states, there may be different restrictions with income limits. So it may eliminate some of the lower down payment programs. But for the most part, from a lending perspective, everything's going to be pretty uniform, no matter what state you're going to purchase in.
And then just from my standpoint, we are in Massachusetts, we're one of few states that actually has an attorney involved in the closing. So it's legally required here. The majority of the states out there don't use attorneys, but use what's called title companies. We actually have a title company and then our office in Massachusetts. But I can certainly, I don't know if Joe, you'll send our contact information for anybody who's out of state. If you want to contact us, we can connect you with either, a title company where you are, or maybe Kevin can refer also Realtor, depending on where you are as well.
Yeah, a couple of people asked, and I will definitely be sharing your contact information, websites afterwards, so people can definitely follow up with you three. Another question that I had come in privately was, are you aware of any first-time home buying assistance programs? I don't know if that's a state-by-state thing or if there are any federal options for people.
Yeah, so my expertise with that stuff is really just focused on Massachusetts. Mass Housing has a great program. However, there are restrictions on how much they'll lend you, for the down payment assistance. And there are loan limits and income limits associated with it. So it can be a difficult program to fit into, but it's definitely a great option if you're able to do so. My company right now doesn't, we don't lend we don't give out down payment assistance. There may be some local banks and credit unions that do that. But in terms of the lenders that we work with, Mass Housing is someone that will do that. And I'm sure, most states have programs as Rhode Island Housing, New Hampshire Housing. So they may have that as well. I'm just not as astute to that, but I can definitely look into that. If someone has a specific state that they're interested in, I can definitely research that for them.
Awesome, thank you. Question here about stubborn sellers who are not meeting their initial negotiation before the inspection happens. They're trying to match the value of the house with what it's really worth, and what they're asking for is way too high. I guess any thoughts about issues with sellers and how we can manage that as buyers?
I'll let Kevin take that one. He has the experience with the realtor. So
that's the funnest part of the job, is dealing with stubborn, unrealistic sellers. So that's part of the reason why they have a seller's agent. Myself and the seller, if I'm on the buy side, we don't control what the seller's decisions are. We just advise them to the best of our ability. So if something's way out of the blue, I can't guarantee the seller is going to come down in price, especially right now in the market, for something. If it's totally reasonable, like they might, but like I said, you can't control the sellers. If we got a house accepted for 600 and then we go do a home inspection and there's a crack in the foundation, or there's mold or asbestos, something like that, and I say, hey, please take care of this, remediate it, or credit us $5,000, we can definitely request it. It just depends on the situation too, if they had any other offers. Unfortunately, we can't control what that seller does, even if they are stubborn. I've come in contact with a lot of them, and I know Gary and Liz has been on the side of that as well on our deals, where sometimes we just can't. Even if we think it is unrealistic and unreasonable, we can't make the seller fix it.
Yeah, it's, real estate in general is a very emotional thing. A lot of sellers, especially today, where they may see their neighbors whose house is completely gutted and renovated, got so much more money over asking, they automatically think that they're going to be getting the same thing when they haven't updated their home since the 1960s. Like, there's a lot of expectations out there that, and just in general, people think, well, this is my house, that my house is great when they're selling. So it's sometimes you have that, that emotional seller that you have to deal with, or even just yourself as a buyer. It is something that's very emotional and personal, because it's either the place that you're going to raise your family or just, enjoy yourself. And so tensions can get sort of out of whack and some seller expectations, like Kevin said, we try to always mitigate that and make sure that we can try and bring people down to reality, but that's not always, unfortunately, possible, but we try very hard to.
Well, we are at time. I thought maybe we'd leave if you three had any wise words of wisdom before we wrap things up. I know there's other questions in the chat, but I just don't think we'll be able to get to them all. So any wise words of wisdom for all of us potential home buyers?
I'll go first, and I just want to say everyone needs to understand that aside from this being our job, I think I can speak for Liz and Kevin. We like what we do. We like, helping people find their homes and keeping people happy. So, don't hesitate to reach out to any one of us. Again, if you don't think you're ready, even if you're planning on buying a year, 2 years down the road, if you have questions, if it helps put you at ease, just call us, email us, text us. I mean, that's what we're here for. But just don't be scared to potentially take the leap. If you're nervous that your credit might not be so good, or, your income might not be great, or you just started a new job, let us help you with that stuff instead of just don't be scared to reach out, because again, you guys may be in a position that you didn't think you were in, and you may be able to buy something. So definitely don't be shy and reach out to any one of us, at any point.
And to piggyback off of Gary, that saying where find that job that you don't feel like you're working, that you love. Like, I don't feel like I'm working when I do real estate. I'm assuming the same for you guys when playing music. I can talk about real estate all day long. If I get Gary or Liz on the phone, they know it's probably a 30-minute conversation because I'm just going to keep going.
That's true.
But definitely don't hesitate to reach out. The process isn't as scary as people make it out to be. Just got to have the right team beside you, and we'll make it a smooth transaction.
Again, just to wrap it up, we really appreciate the opportunity to talk to you guys. Like Kevin said, this is something that we love to do. This is like to educate buyers out there and get them to a point where they feel comfortable sort of making that American dream a reality. Like it's such a cool feeling on our end, and that's why we love doing what we do. And for those who we couldn't get to your questions, please don't hesitate in reaching out to us via email or calling us, because we would love to have the opportunity to answer those questions. And if something, if tonight you're talking to your significant other and you want to take that leap, please don't hesitate to reach out to us. We'd love to be a part of the journey.
Thank you, Liz, Gary, Kevin. Again, we appreciate it so much. Everyone have a great day, and we'll catch you at the next event.